Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update from SilverX Mining. SilverX is traded on the TSX.V under the ticker AGX and on the OTCQB under the ticker AGXPF. I'm joined today with the CEO and director of SilverX Mining, José García. And Jose, it's great to get you on the show for an update. We were remarking off mic, it's been since December since we've had you on the KE report. We have caught up at other conventions and had discussions since then, most recently at Beaver Creek. It was nice to see you in person at the conference. But I think this is an interesting time to do an update with SilverX because you're really in the middle of a transformation and a turnaround in your operations, in the trajectory of the company, obviously fueled by higher silver prices, but also a lot of hard work your team has done behind the scenes on optimizing your mine at Tangana in Peru, but also on the exploration front and from a capital markets front and your balance sheet improvement. So let's dig in on a high level to how things are going with SilverX.
Hi, Shad. Thank you for having me again. I'm very pleased to be with you on this podcast. Yes, I think you summarized that very well. SilverX, for those who are not that familiar with this company that has been public now for about 4 years, is a fast growth producer and developer. Over the last few years, we've consolidated a very significant silver polymetallic resource in central Peru, and we've demonstrated that we can be extremely agile in generating that kind of value. Finally, as you said, we are enjoying higher silver prices and in general, a better market for junior producers. And we were able to raise money recently and to finally have all the cash that we need to strengthen our performance on a number of fronts. As I said, we are creating a lot of value, but by continuing to increase our resource, we will continue to create value by strengthening our operational performance. And just a few days ago, just about 20 days, we published a PEA on our property that is explaining to our investors that we are going to evolve organically and become a significant silver producer with more than 6 million ounces of silver per year. So I think we're very proud of what we are doing. As you just said, our team has been working extremely hard over the last few years, and we are finally starting to see some of the results.
Well, let's dig into a couple of these areas, Jose. We will get to that PEA because I think that's a watershed moment and a document for the company showing the future. Let's start off with the here and now. I don't think we've gotten an update on operations for the first half of the year, but just give us a snapshot of how things have been improving quarter over quarter in Q1 and Q2, and as we're pretty much finishing up Q3 today. I know those numbers aren't out yet, but give us a sense of the operations at the Tangana mining unit and then the potential for growth from the coming Plata mining unit.
Absolutely. For those who are trying to understand the picture of SilverX, let's say that we have a district scale project with three mining areas. The Tangana mining unit, as we call it, which is what we are operating since 2023, and where we have a significant portion of our resource. Then we have two more mining units, red silver or ruby silver, because it's a very high grade silver target, and Plata. And Plata is a very significant portion of our district. Earlier this year, I think it was in February, we published a new resource where there is a significant portion of it coming from Plata, and we call it Plata, meaning silver in Spanish, because it's really high grade as well. Having said that, we have a processing facility right at the core of our district. Let's say that all of these three assets are more or less same distance to that processing area. Now, we've been producing since 2023 in Tangana, and Tangana has been a mine that has been performing in a very uneven way, saying that we haven't been able to perform at the desired levels. Why is that? Mostly because it was a mine that lacked development for a long time. SilverX was a company that was underfinanced for a long period. Therefore, we couldn't do our homework in terms of deploying the capex that is needed to make a mine really productive. However, and over the years, we've been increasing our performance. When you look at our financials over the last few years, we've been basically break even. For about a year and a half, we've been making money at, let's say, national project level, let's say Peru level, and we've been operating at a small loss at a corporate level. That was a relief at the time because we obviously put an end to that sort of bleeding, if you like, when it comes to money or to equity dilution. But now, over the last few quarters, we've been improving steadily. We've been placing our focus on a number of fronts, primarily not necessarily increasing tonnage by increasing dilution, therefore, ore value. We've been trying to streamline our operation by focusing on high grade ore, reducing dilution, and making sure that we mine for a better margin, not just for a larger tonnage. That's very difficult and is very common across the board of narrow vein miners, put it that way. I think we are on our path there. We've done a terrific job. And now that we finally have some money to be deployed, this is going to be accelerated. Let's say that the turnaround will be a lot faster. We've identified a number of critical initiatives that go from the infrastructure for the mine, projects such as ventilation, additional development, and obviously more infill drilling. So over the next few quarters, I'm absolutely certain that Tangana will be a mine that is going to shine and going to provide a very steady cash flow. I think investors are going to be very positively rewarded in that sense. And going forward, as I said, we aim to increase our throughput. We aim to increase our, let's say, operational performance by increasing capacity in the long run, going back to the PEA that we'll address in a minute. But we are now operating at 500 tons a day mine, which is relatively small in the scope of things. But the idea here is that we've got a large resource and we need to increase that throughput to basically 6 times. The moment you take that increase, the performance of the company changes dramatically. And that's the real value of the company. We are demonstrating that we can operate at a small scale, that we can make money at a small scale, let alone the money we can actually make when we increase capacity sooner than later.
Well, let's dig into this idea a little bit more about increasing capacity, but also, like you say, increasing the grade and being a little more methodical with the operations from a development standpoint. Right now, it's producing at 600 tons per day. You're going to be expanding it to 720 tons per day as a first step. But the big picture view that's in the PEA is by 2029, so just a few years out, you want to get that to 3,000 tons per day and be producing that 6 million silver equivalent ounces per year. So walk us through the roadmap of how you get from 600 tons per day up to 3,000 tons per day and what that does for cost, efficiencies, and productivity.
Absolutely. If you look at the current picture of Silver X, as you said, is at 500, 600 tons a day. We need to boost that performance by maintaining the high grade, not increasing dilution. Obviously, go to those 720. That is the nameplate capacity of our mill. And we are now getting permitted for 1,000 tons a day. So let's say with the capital we just raised, we intend not to just book the 720, but in a relatively short span of time, get to 1,000 tons a day. Now, when you look at the long term, as you just said, we are envisioning a 3,000 tons a day scenario. And that would be a combination of 2 or 3 mining areas with 2 mills. The existing mill that will be upgraded to 1,500 tons a day, and a new mill that will be built for 1,500 tons a day. That new mill is meant to get the permits somewhere in the next 3 to 6 months, hopefully in Q4, but potentially Q1. The moment we get that new environmental impact study approved, we are good to build another mill. In the meantime, we need to develop one more mine, the Plata mining unit. How we're going to sequence that? So I would say that to get from 500 to 3,000 in 3 years, going to first increase the size of the existing mill, going to increase the size of Tangana to about 1,000 tons a day, and then we'll do the project finance that is needed for both building a new mill and developing the new mine. Back to the PEA, when you look at the economics of Silver X becoming that 6+ million ounces producer, I think we have an extremely competitive project. The pre-production capex that we've estimated is basically $80+ million USD to go from 1.25 to 6 million ounces production, actually 6.2 million ounces over 12 years. And I think that's an extremely competitive project. And we are going to phase that. We're going to stage that in 2 phases. As I said, we'll increase the existing mill, we'll be in a second mill. In the meantime, we'll redevelop or we'll rebuild an old mine called Plata. And I think that's something we are going to do with a very modest budget and at a very fast speed.
Yeah, I think it's a very reasonable capex for a project of that size. And if people dig into the PEA, which you put out to the marketplace on the 4th of September, I recommend people listening in go pull up that press release and read through all the detail. We can't get into every component, but it's got a net present value of 440 million at a 5% discount rate, and that's at the metal assumption used. If you're using spot prices, it's a lot higher than that. The other thing I think is worth noting, Jose, is that your all-in sustaining cost for the life of mine are estimated to be around $15.8 per ounce. So let's just say $15, $16 in that range. That's a lot lower than what you're producing now. So in addition to producing over 6 million ounces of silver equivalent, you're going to have really competitive costs. So maybe to speak to what that'll do for the revenue generation of the company over the next few years, the growth profile you're on.
Absolutely. And you know that the only sustained cost that we had over the last few years was always in the mid 20s, right? Up to the high 20s. And why was that? This basically size and lack of performance, what I described a few minutes ago. Now, when you take this to full capacity, it really becomes a competitive project. Now, when you look at the overall revenue, let's say margin that will be provided over those 14 years mine life, is pretty significant. We are looking at a mine that's going to produce at least 50% margin. And that's really good. Now, why is it important to be competitive? Well, because you want to be making money not with a 35 or $40 silver. You want to be making money at $20 silver. And the reality is that SilverX is building the case for that. I think we're going to be very successful in doing that, and we're going to become a really company with a level of operational excellence, if you like, when it comes to narrow vein mining, which is our bread and butter.
Well, another thing that's part and parcel of this whole plan is the growth you're going to have from multiple areas of your Nueva Recuperada project. Like we've talked about already, you've got the area around Tangana that you'll be continuing to explore, and you'll have that plata mining unit and that whole area, and then you even have this red silver mining unit. You've got a couple different chunks. You showed me the map at Beaver Creek, and it was kind of blowing my mind, Jose, with how much upside there still is on your property package from an exploration standpoint. And you have a goal to take your resources right now that I think are around 150 million silver equivalent ounces and potentially grow that by 3 to 5 times, which would be a pretty big growth profile. So talk to us about the exploration potential on your land package.
Well, the district scale project, as we typically refer to as, is a what you call partnership that it's been in production, a small production for centuries, literally, and is one of those districts that will continue to give ore for centuries, right? We're basically scratching surface. We've been drilling just a few veins. Actually, most of the resource is containing about 15, 20 veins out of the more than 200 veins that we've spotted and mapped on our district. When you look at those mining areas, as you just mentioned, red, silver, and plata, if I would highlight something about those, is high grade of silver. We had to start mining in Tangana for a number of reasons. It was permits, it was the logical sequence at the time. But now we have the opportunity to deploy some money into drilling and developing higher silver grades. And that's something that the market is going to appreciate over the next few months. Because first, we'll try and increase not only the resource, but the category of those resources. Again, high grade of silver. And we are going to get ready to produce on a fast track. I think that's the perfect complement for Tangana. Over the next 14 years, Tangana will give us the tonnage, the grade, but plata and red silver will actually put sort of the cherry on the cake. And that's something I think, as I said, is our key competence I'm going to be doing in the next few months. Big chunk of the money we just raised is going to be deployed on those particular activities. Going to increase not just the value of the asset, but going to define better mining opportunities for us.
Well, so the picture that's coming together for SilverX is growth in multiple areas, Jose. You got growth through better grade going through. You've got growth through improving throughput by the mill expansion you're going to be going through, and those multiple steps as you get the permit in, as you go from 720 tons per day to 1,000 tons per day to 3,000 tons per day. I think people listening will be able to appreciate the economies of scale and the efficiencies that come with that. And then you have all the growth through exploration. And like you say, those other mining, the plata mining unit and the red silver being such higher grade areas, they could really, as you say, put a cherry on top. What would you say about the financial health of the company? I think there's been concern, over the last 2 years that, there was a little weakness there, but now you're in a stronger position. You just raised money. Give us a sense of the financial health of SilverX.
Absolutely. Well, the last few years, investors were afraid that they were going to get further diluted. Why is that? Because we had a company that was basically operating at a small loss, and we had to raise some money, like $3 to $5 million every 9 or 12 months, right? So obviously, investors didn't like that. Now we got to a point where that dilution is not needed, and if dilution happened again, will happen at a much more attractive price because we are actually growing fast. Our market cap today reflects better the position of the company, and we just did a financing at 15 cents, so our share is about there. But I think it's going to fly over the next few months. That's my personal estimate. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw, SilverX's share price at, in the proximity of $1, and that actually will be a very good reward. Now, in terms of the financial strength of the company, I think now we have the right amount of cash to make sure that our company produces steady cash flow. That said, I would like to avoid dilution, as I said, and I think obviously we need a couple of quarters to prove that to the market. I wanted to mention that I think is interesting for investors' consideration. As I said, I always put the value on the concept of our district. There is a number of mines in our district. We are in the department of Huancavelica in central Peru, up in the highlands, in the Andes. But last quarter, there was a very important acquisition in our neighborhood. There was a private company that was acquired by Endeavor Silver, a very renowned silver producer. And they basically acquire a resource, an asset, a very similar entity to ours. And they actually paid for that $250 million Canadian approximately, which is more than twice our current market cap. And that's a good indication of value. And that didn't happen at today's prices. That happened at 6 months ago prices. That's a huge endorsement to the value of our project and to the interest of this district of Huancavelica. It's a historic mining district, as I said, for centuries, and it's really finally taking the value that it deserves. I wouldn't be surprised if you can see SilverX over the next, few months, as I said, having a much more rewarding value as investors will realize the potential of our asset and obviously the potential of increasing production very rapidly.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Jose. We had Endeavor Silver on the show when they bought that copal mine in Peru, right next door to you. And as you say, they paid quite a bit more than your market cap for it and still feel like they got an amazing deal because of all the growth they have. But it really highlights right next door your project and all of the land concessions you have and the value that you have there probably should be a lot higher than it is now. And we'll see how the market rates that over time. But it is starting to re-rate higher. I guess let's just tie it all together for people listening in. Again, you're going to have growth through operations. You're going to have growth through just higher throughput and higher grade and better run operations. You've got more financial wiggle room now to invest in the business, invest in the enlarged plant, and you're working on the permitting process, and you've got all this exploration upside. What else would you want to leave people with here today that are listening in as far as how SilverX is positioned in the marketplace to grow and just amongst the silver names in the space?
Thank you. That's a great summary. I think if I have to summarize all the upcoming catalysts for our investors, again, we're going to keep on strengthening our resource, identifying better areas, higher grades. That's key for the next few years to be ready to produce higher grade, to produce at a higher rate. Second, we're going to strengthen our performance. Investors will see that over the next few quarters. And finally, I think SilverX is a company that is obviously, it has the vision to grow. We are a company that is actively looking for opportunities to create that medium scale or mid-tier producer. And I think many of those, or let's say most of those, are in our neighborhood. Just the arrival of Endeavor Silver, by the way, I congratulate Endeavor because they made a terrific acquisition. I'm certain about it. But I think that's a huge endorsement, as I said. But that's basically our story. Okay, it's rather simple. It's a story of fast growth, building resources, and obviously operating them quickly. We are not a company that will be sitting on our resource, will not be waiting to be bought out. We are just trying to build a producer.
Well, we'll definitely keep following along with all the news you have on tap here at the KE Report. Let's maybe circle up once you get the Q3 numbers out and have you come back on and give us an operations update at that time. We'll keep abreast of all the exploration and the expansion at the project. And for those of you listening into the call, if you want to follow along with all the news at SilverX Mining, definitely click on the link in the show notes down below. It takes you right over to their website, straight to their news section where you can sign up for updates and hit your email inbox or just follow along with the news as it drops. Jose, keep us posted. Always great to talk with you and looking forward, as always, to our next conversation.
Likewise, Chad. Good talking to you. Speak soon.